Before we start, this one took 65 years to get a name. It still doesn't have a killer.
And the body itself already told us who did it. We just didn't want to hear it.
A body can't name a suspect.
A body covered in old scars and new bruises absolutely can. It tells you it wasn't one bad night.
The boy in the box.
There it is.
February 25th, 1957, Philadelphia's Fox Chase neighborhood. A 26-year-old college student named Frederick Bononis is out checking a rabbit trap when he finds a body in the brush. A young boy, wrapped in a blanket, stuffed inside a cardboard box that had originally held a JCPenney bassinet.
No. And here's the part that never sits right with me. Bononis didn't call it in that day. He found the body and waited until the next morning to report it. A kid who'd just seen that, and he sat on it overnight.
Understandable, honestly. People freeze. That's not evidence of anything except being 26 and horrified.
Maybe. I'm not accusing him of anything. I just think it's worth saying out loud, because everything about this case starts with someone not reporting something they should have.
He was maybe 4 to 6 years old, naked, severely malnourished, beaten badly enough that blunt force trauma was ruled the cause of death.
Sure, but here's the detail that actually matters. His hair had been recently cut. His fingernails were trimmed. Someone had cleaned him up right before he ended up in that box.
Which is a medical record, not a guess. The scars on his body, some surgical, on his ankle, his groin, his chin, showed this wasn't a single incident. This was ongoing abuse for a long time by someone with regular access to him.
And no one ever reported him missing. Not one person anywhere ever called in a child matching his description as gone.
He didn't even have a social security number issued to him. As far as any government record was concerned, he didn't officially exist.
Which means whoever was responsible for him kept him almost entirely invisible, his whole short life. And then, days before he died, groomed him like he was about to be seen by somebody.
For 3 years, nothing. Then in 1960, a medical examiner's office employee named Remington Bristow does something no one else was willing to do. He consults a psychic.
Which sounds ridiculous until you hear what happened next.
It sounds ridiculous either way, Simone.
The psychic tells him to look for a specific kind of house, matching a foster home. And when she's brought out to the discovery site, she leads him directly to one. A real, unlicensed foster home, about 1.5 miles away, run by a couple named Arthur and Catherine Nicoletti. 25 kids moving through that house at a time, off the books.
And Bristow finds a bassinet at an estate sale on that property that matches the box exactly. JCPenney model, plus blankets on the clothesline that match the one the boy was wrapped in, cut in half.
Sure, there's more. Catherine's adult daughter from a previous marriage, a woman named Anna Marie Nagel with an intellectual disability, lived at the house too, and had 4 children of her own, 3 of them stillborn. Bristow's theory was straightforward. The boy was her son, born out of wedlock, and the family disposed of him rather than let that get out.
Right, a theory. Philadelphia PD refused to reinvestigate the family for over 20 years on the strength of a psychic tip and a matching bassinet. That's not evidence, that's a hunch with a receipt attached.
It's a hunch that took until 1984, 24 years later, before 2 homicide detectives finally, reluctantly, agreed to sit down with Arthur Nicoletti. And when Bristow pushed him to take a polygraph, Nicoletti refused.
People refuse polygraphs for all kinds of reasons that have nothing to do with guilt. They're not admissible for a reason.
Sure, but he also married his stepdaughter after his first wife died. That's the same stepdaughter Bristow suspected was the boy's mother. I'm not saying that proves anything on its own. I'm saying it's exactly the kind of detail that should have gotten someone a warrant, not a polite conversation 24 years too late.
And for the record, the family was eventually cleared. DNA and re-interviews by the Vidocq Society ruled them out entirely.
They were. I'm not arguing the Nicolettis did it. I'm arguing that a department that takes 24 years to knock on a door isn't a department building a case. It's a department that's already decided this doesn't matter enough to rush.
In 2002, a woman using the name Martha comes forward with a story. She says her own mother purchased the boy, she calls him Jonathan, from his birth parents back in 1954 and beat him to death in their home.
Okay, it's an awful story. and it was investigated, and it was never substantiated. I want to be fair about that.
It wasn't just unsubstantiated. Genealogists have since confirmed there's no biological connection between Martha's family and Joseph at all. The DNA that eventually identified him ruled her account out completely.
Which I'll take. But notice the pattern I keep pointing at every time one of these comes up. The psychic's tip, Martha's confession, even the theories nobody could prove. Every single one of them independently lands on the same shape. A child kept by an adult in a position of care, hidden, hurt over time, not by a stranger in an alley.
Or every one of them is a different, unreliable narrator independently inventing the same trope, because abusive parent hides the body is the single most common pattern in cases like this, statistically. That's not corroboration, that's base rate.
Maybe, but the actual physical evidence agrees with the base rate here, Eli. The old scars, the malnutrition, the haircut right before he died. None of that points to a stranger.
In 1998, investigators exhumed the boy's remains for the first time and pulled mitochondrial DNA from a tooth, hoping to finally get a lead.
And it went nowhere.
It wasn't just bad luck. Standard forensic DNA testing checks about 24 genetic markers, run against a law enforcement database built for matching convicted felons or direct missing persons reports. Nobody with his DNA was ever going to be in that system. The tool was wrong for the problem.
He was reburied that same year at Ivy Hill Cemetery, still unnamed.
Then, in 2019, Philadelphia police get a court order for a second exhumation, not because the first attempt was botched, but because they needed far more genetic material than mitochondrial DNA could give them. This time, it's forensic genealogist Colleen Fitzpatrick and her team at Identifinders International, working with the department's forensic lab.
Okay, and what they needed wasn't 24 markers anymore. It was a full genetic profile. Over 800,000 points across his entire genome. The kind you'd get from a consumer ancestry test, not a crime lab.
Fitzpatrick herself said the DNA they pulled from the bone was like confetti, basically shattered by 6 decades in the ground. It took her team until spring of 2021, 2.5 years, just to stitch enough of it back into a usable profile to upload anywhere.
Once it was on GEDmatch, a genealogist named Misty Gillis started finding matches. Not to Joseph directly, there was no direct match anywhere, but to third and fourth cousins, people sharing a fraction of a % of his DNA, who had no idea they were related to a decades-old cold case.
Which sounds thin, but Fitzpatrick described building the family tree from there like solving a giant Sudoku puzzle. You network the cousins together by figuring out where their branches married into each other, working inward from both directions until the branches only funnel to one person.
And that's exactly what happened. Cousins on his mother's side and cousins on his father's side, independently, could only possibly connect through one individual. That's not a guess. That's 2 separate lines of evidence agreeing.
And on December 8th, 2022, 65 years, 9 months, and 13 days after he was found, Philadelphia police finally give him his name, Joseph Augustus Zarelli. Born January 13th, 1953, parents Augustus John Zarelli and Mary Elizabeth from West Philadelphia.
And even with the name, police still haven't named a killer. At the announcement, Captain Jason Smith said outright they have suspicions about who's responsible, but won't share them because it's still an open homicide case.
That's true, and I think that restraint is actually appropriate. Suspicion isn't the same evidentiary bar as enough to charge someone, even 65 years later.
Or it's the bar being applied to protect people who are almost certainly already dead themselves. Both of Joseph's parents are gone. Police won't even confirm details about them, out of respect for living half-siblings on both sides, most of whom, by every account, had no idea he ever existed.
Which would mean the case can be understood without ever being legally solved. Those aren't the same thing, but I'll admit they can look the same from the outside. In July of 1957, with no name and no family to claim him, Philadelphia detectives served as pallbearers at his funeral and buried him in a potter's field near Dunk's Ferry in the far northeast of the city. The donated headstone read, "Heavenly Father, bless this unknown boy."
And people never stopped visiting. Decades of strangers bringing flowers to a grave with no name on it for a child they never knew, because the not knowing was somehow unbearable to an entire city.
That Potter's Field isn't just his grave either. It's held hundreds of murder victims and unclaimed dead over the decades. And in September 2024, investigators went back and exhumed 8 more of them, ranging from children to adults, some going back 60 years, specifically to run the same DNA and genealogy process that finally worked on Joseph.
As of the most recent reporting, none of those 8 have been identified yet, which tells you Joseph wasn't a one-off miracle. He was the proof of concept for a technique the city is now using on an entire field full of nameless people.
After the first exhumation in '98, he was reburied at Ivy Hill Cemetery. Once he was finally identified, they dedicated a new headstone there in January 2023. His 70th birthday would have been that same month. It reads, America's Unknown Child.
There's a $20,000 reward standing right now for information leading to an arrest. And just this past January, his 73rd birthday, the Vidocq Society used the anniversary to launch a nationwide initiative to identify other unidentified child murder victims, using exactly what worked on Joseph's case.
William Fleischer, who's with Vidocq, called this the longest continuously investigated unsolved homicide in Philadelphia's history, which tells you this case was never actually cold. It was just unnamed.
69 years later, and it's still open. Someone out there in their 70s or 80s might still remember something. Police are still asking. Investigators didn't disclose which specific ancestry databases they used to crack the case, only that the results came from public consumer-accessible ones, the same kind anyone can upload a home DNA test to.
Bristow worked this case for 36 years, unpaid, until his death in 1993. He never saw the answer.
For decades, nobody could even agree on his age at death. Estimates ranged from 3 years old to 6.
Philadelphia's forensic lab is now applying this same genetic genealogy process to dozens of other unidentified remains cases going back 60 years. Okay, here's mine. My case is that DNA is what actually broke this open, and DNA is what will finish it, if anything does. 65 years of psychics and confessions and foster home theories went nowhere. Not because people weren't trying, but because none of it was proof. One genetic genealogy program, built on cousins nobody knew they had, did what 6 decades of leads couldn't.
And my case is that the science gave him back his name. But the pattern was visible this whole time, sitting right there on his own body. Sustained, private, caregiver-level abuse by someone who kept him hidden from every system that should have known he existed. The psychic's tip, the Nicoletti theory, Martha's confession, none of them were the right answer individually, but they all pointed the same direction, and I don't think that's a coincidence. I think that's what happens when the truth is simple and nobody wants to say it plainly.
We need proof, though, not a direction. Proof.
We do. We just might never get it. We got his name back. I'm not sure we get anything else.